All right. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So it's good to have you all here for another Sunday, another lecture, another opportunity of being here together and learning a little bit from our gospel. And today we're going to be talking about Ask and You Shall Receive by Marco. But before, we're going to have our friend Danielle reading for us from the book Happy Life.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Should I just?
Yes.
Irritability is a thorn stuck in the flesh of emotion, which should be rooted out. The longer it stays there, the worse the state of the one who has it. It generates infections that are as long lasting as they are pernicious. The irritable person needs no reasons for his bad mood or dissatisfaction. He creates them easily since he is led by the aggression, bitter feelings. He becomes unbearable and gives off the morbid state that characterizes his behavior. He is pleased when he displeases. He is happy when he averages himself, even on someone who has done him no harm. He is always unhappy for the pleasure of it. Get the best of irritation, or else it will destroy you. Oh, just
Daniel.
Let us all now here connect with God, with Jesus, our Master, and ask them to help us through the good spirits here present, to open our minds and our hearts to the lecture that we're going to receive today, to the lessons that was brought to guide our pathway. And so be it.
Okay, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
All right, so today we're going to be talking about primarily chapter 27 on the Gospel according to Spiritism, which is actually, that's the title of the chapter, Ask and You Shall Receive. And obviously we're going to be bringing some other important information, right, that regarding how we ask and what we expect when we ask or we pray, right? In this case, we're going to be talking a little bit about prayer too, right? And I'm going to start the lecture with this some images, which may be a little bit shocking. So I have to tell everyone that first, they're not real. By the way, these are all photoshopped images that are done on purpose of making things funnier for an audience on social media. So don't be alarmed when you see them. So can you move to the next slide? Okay. So so this is called On Adventure with Daddy. This is an Instagram image, and this is an interesting story. So Dad, in this case, started to get all these text messages and messages from the wife, right, saying like, "What's happening to the kids? How are you guys doing?" Because they're all at home together, right, the baby and the father. And as he's a visual artist guy, it's like, you know what, I'm just going to try to make things interesting. And then he started to Photoshop the kid doing all these really, really strange things and sending back to the mother saying, oh, here we are, this is what we're doing, right? Some of those images are, really scary. Some are actually really funny. But when I was looking through, and I follow him on Instagram, so when I was looking through Instagram, I started to realize that some of those images are really, really interesting for Spiritism. Because if you believe that we are the kids, right, spiritually speaking, right, and God is our father, mother, right, this is exactly what we do every single day. Like, look at this kid, like, having fun driving a car, which again, by the way, it's not driving a car, it's not all Photoshop. But if you think about this, dear God and dear Daddy, I just want to have like a fancy car. Like imagine this kid's like, I want to have like a sports car. I want to drive it, right? That's totally legit, right? The kid would love to do that, right? But we're definitely going to say a resounding no, right? Does that make any sense? No, right? But what do we do when we ask God for things, right? Think about it. We're probably asking for this. Are we asking like, oh God, please do this, give me that, fix this, do that, right? And probably most of the time, we're asking for things that are resounding no's to us, right? But we don't realize that, right? Because we're still in the infancy of spiritual development, right? Our rules, as Piaget likes to put to us, right? The idea of both Pestalozzi and Piaget, the idea that we're just the level of development that the rules are still enforced into us, right? We don't have the rules inside of us yet, right? So when we have the rules or the governing rules of the universe inside of us, then we don't have to have external rules applied to us because we know we are them. Like we know exactly what to do all the time, right? That is the apex of evolution, right? But we're in a stage, obviously, that we need rules to be enforced into us. That's why we have laws that tell you that you can't do this, you can't do that, otherwise you're going to be punished, right? Because otherwise we would do it, right? That's exactly how where we are, even in our society. And spiritually speaking, we're actually at the same level, right? So we try to do things or ask for things or want things to be done in a spiritual or religious perspective, you think about that way, that we absolutely cannot have, right? We're not ready for it, right? And if you think about, spiritually speaking, imagine if you're asking for the ability to kind of know what to do all the time, or make the certain decisions, or have the power to do certain things. Imagine that power comes responsibility, right? Or the ability comes responsibility. And are we ready for what we're asking for, right? And the next question is that, what are we asking right now? Is it the best for us? That is the tricky one, right? Because how do we know that, right? I keep thinking this all the time. It's something that I like to spend some time thinking about. It's like, to a point that all my prayers now are pretty much, God, just let me fulfill what I already signed up for without complaining. That's pretty much what I pray right now. Because realistically, every time, I ask for courage, I ask for strength to deal with the trials, I ask for patience to deal with it. But I'm realizing that, what we're asking really is more like, thank you than asking, right? We're having this chance, we're here, we got our job to do, and we kind of forgot what it is temporarily, right? We're working on it, right? So we're kind of working on this job without instructions, or the guidance is coming, but it comes in little hints, right? That we receive. It doesn't come as a obvious, oh, you gotta do this. There are manuals, the gospel, right? The books, TSS. Like we have all this information coming to us, right? The guidance, right? But we're still asking for a lot of things that we may be a resounding no to us, right? That's the first one. There's a second thing too, and we'll move to the next slide now. That happens quite often, and this is, there's obviously, there's some passages about this too that we can read about, but this is an interesting image, right? The idea of being lost in the desert and, in need of water, right? And you ask for water, right? But in our mindset, right, when we're asking for help, we're going to receive this beautiful plastic bottle filled with water, right? Pure crystal will show up, materialize using the medium's power, right? To do this, it will show up like in front of us. And that's what we expect, right? When we're asking, right? Dear God, and then, as many of the passages that we read in Spiritism is going to tell us, well, you're going to receive the guidance, right? To say, you know what, take that path. We'll lead you to where you want to go, right? Or maybe, you know what, just get out of there. That's a bad idea where you are. Just go back, right? And redo, like go back. And we're like stubborn, like, no, keep doing it, right? And then there's all these signs come, this messages, this intuition, like everything comes to us and we're like, no, no, I don't want to see any of this. I just want my bottled water. That's all I want, right? The bottled water will never come, right? And then we'll die angry with God. It's like, oh, I asked for the water and it never came, right? Never came. But what do we expect then? That's the other question. So the other one is what we are asking, like in the image of the baby driving a car, and what are we expecting back as an answer, right? The idea of we expecting that you have this materialization of the bottle, crystalline water bottle in front of us in the middle of the desert, right? Which is not going to happen. Right? So those two concepts are very, very interesting because it taps into a lot of who we are and understanding our challenges, right? What's in the moral evolution of us as spirits, what we understand, what is our role, what's God doing for us, and how do we ask and what we receive. So that's actually a very the more you think about things you've been asking, the more you understand actually who you are, right? Particularly moments of struggle, right? When you're really struggling, right, with a situation, if you kind of step a minute and think about that struggle, desperation, stress, all those feelings that are running around your mind, you learn a lot about yourself, right? With simple, just looking at what you're asking, right? And again, what you expect to receive back, right? So I think that's the two concepts we're gonna be talking about today. So we can move to the next slide, and we can just stay there because this is a lot of what are we going to talk about. Okay, so some of the obvious concepts about behind this is the understanding that um, of faith and prayer, right, and connected to the idea of what we ask and what we shall receive, right. So Kardec tells us in a very clear way, right, the unshakable faith, right, is the one that will face reason or science in any time of humanity, right? That's it. So that's real faith. Faith, the unshakable faith is the one you can argue, you can question, you can reason, you can discuss it clearly without any doubt, right, at any time, right? But one of the concepts behind faith, which is the idea of believing and trusting and following, right? One of the ideas about faith is also the idea of establishing a relationship with God, in this case, right? So if you have faith, means that if you really have faith in something, right, you establish a relationship that you trust, right? So you know what to expect, right? You know what's what's the end goal of that relationship, which in our case would be perfection, right? Spiritually speaking, right? But you also follow the overall concept of ideas, in our case, the divine laws, right? So it's a relationship you establish, right? That is really the core of our faith, right? But in many cases, we question our faith, right? Exactly because of that concept of what we're asking while receiving, right? That creates a trouble, like a problem, right, with our own faith, right? I'll give you many examples, but I could give you many examples, but let's try to be more practical, right? The idea of loss of someone, in other words, like if someone disconnects, right? This is a scenario where your faith, it will be questioned many times, right? Because the way we see the situation usually is like, why is this happening? Why is there suffering? Like, why? It's the whys, right? And we typically ask for that not to happen. Isn't that true? Like, I rarely see someone evolved enough to pray for someone who's about to discarnate that's going to say, you know what? It's okay to go. Because it is okay to go. But we forget that, right? In that moment, right? And we pray for that not to happen. So in many cases, we're actually making it difficult for the spirit to discriminate, and it's actually exactly what is supposed to happen, right? So see that contrast of how we see the situation, what we ask for, and what we expect. That actually breaks a little bit of that faith that we just talked about. So that's why Jesus says in the gospel, he says, the moment of faith, right, it will be tested, right, in the moments of the biggest challenges you're going to face. That's really where your faith is going to come out, right? So there are great examples, Andrea Luis brings great examples to us of, discarnation process, like Sigismund and many others. So he's talking about the moment where, a spirit is about to leave the body, right, go back to the spiritual world, which is actually our real world, by the way. So this is a moment of celebration on the other side, right? Think about it, right? There in the spiritual world, they're actually receiving back this brother that went to a mission, right? They're all waiting and celebrating that moment. And on this side, we're obviously missing and we're sad, right? Because we're seeing that person go, right? But if you look only with your physical eyes, whatever the cause was for that to happen, it was an accident or disease and all of that, that's all we focus on. Physical. Right? Oh, yeah. Oh, that happened. Oh, no, this is so bad. Oh, this is so much suffering. Realistically speaking, most of the time is the opposite that's happening, right? That person is actually leaving themselves for the mission they've done already. So we should be celebrating, like in the other way with the spiritual world, right? But obviously, because we're not evolved enough to comprehend that concept, in many cases you see entire networks of people and families praying for that to not to happen, to the point that the spiritual world has to actually intervene to actually allow for that to happen. For example, like we see in Andrea Luis, the spirits actually made the patient feel better. So the family can step back a little bit, stop praying, and say, okay, fine, oh, they're better, and then they disconnect, right? Because by making the patient feel better or more lucid and vivid, right, they break that current of people projecting their thoughts for them not to disconnect, right? So they feel, oh, that's better now. They're feeling better. Oh, that's so good, right? So there's a positive vibe in the environment now. Everybody feeling good that the patient's feeling better, right? And then the spirits use that moment to, finish the discarnation process, right? So that's where what we ask and what we receive, and how does that affect our faith, right? And that's typically moments of struggle, right? The discarnation is one of the great examples, but in your daily lives, you're going to find moments where we struggle, right? And we ask for things that make no sense, right? And we get upset that what we asked does not happen, right? So we have to constantly be thinking about, and I realize that it's kind of sometimes challenging, right? Because I catch myself doing that quite often now, like almost every time, like looking at my thoughts and saying, what am I expecting in this situation, right? Is there a chance that I'm the one wrong, right? And I'm realizing that actually happens pretty much 100% of the time. The way I'm seeing things is a very biased, unilateral view of things that is biased by the physical matter only and not the spiritual sense of things, right? And I catch myself in that mode all the time, right? And I hope you guys are more involved than I am, because I'm struggling. Okay. So Leon Denis, in the book Here and Hereafter, he talks about faith, and I'm going to read straight from the book here because I find it a very interesting way he puts that what is faith concept, right? So he said faith is man's confidence in his destined end, right? It is the sentiment that urges him towards the infinite power, God in this case. It is the certainty of being the road to truth. See, is that path. Faith is not a time-limited event. It's like, I have faith right now. No. Faith, you have to project that towards your final moment of truth, of evolution, right? As Leon Denis is saying here. So it is like I said, it's a certainty that you're in this road of truth, right? Blind faith is the lantern whose red glare cannot overcome the fog. Enlightened faith is the electric searchlight which throws a bright beam over the road ahead. So the real faith is that one that will shine no matter how dark it looks around you. And this is interesting because the fog here is representing our thoughts, our fogged mind, right? By these many, many distracting or antagonic thoughts that we have all the time about situations, about faith, about God, about us, about that super annoying person that is working with you that you really want, like I can think about that. All those little things, right? That cloud our minds, right? And the other is so great at writing it because he said, the faith is the one that actually breaks through that, right? And again, supports the idea of what you ask and what you're going to receive, right? So that's the preamble to it, right? Okay, and a lot of philosophical stuff, but let's go back to practical stuff now. So asking. So how do we ask, right? How do we ask? What do we do for asking? Is there a way to do it? There isn't.
Let's first try.
Yes. What do you do then? Right?
The magical word.
Yeah. This is so. Seriously. I want to. It's a good reflection moment to think about this, right? Because it's nice. We can read the Spirit's book. It has all there. How prayer, what do you ask, and this and that, and the formats and not formats. Yeah, sure. We can read through all of that, but just think about it. How do you ask? We know in Spiritism, we know that the act of asking or prayer is a projection of the thought, right, into the universe that surrounds us. And the strength of that projection depends on obviously how connected to the good vibrations of you and God you are. So the more crystalline and pure that request is, the more strength, the more faith you have, the more power you project into this antenna, right, that sends that thought into the universe, which eventually is going to be captured by a number of spirits that will be responding to it and support it, right? And eventually you receive back some sort of answer every single time. That's the physical explanation of it, right? Now, we tend in Spiritism to criticize people who follow formats of praying, which I think is a bad idea in general, right? Us, not them, right? People can pray the way they want. It doesn't make a difference, right? If I want to pray kneeling down, facing to whatever direction you're the planet, that's fine, right? There's no format to it, but if that's the way they can project their power, so be it. That's fantastic, right? If you have to go through 15 rounds of prayers to connect and to ask, totally cool, right? What are the problems? My mom can pray for 2 hours nonstop, right? Reciting these things that she memorizes, and I can see the emanation of force coming from her body when she's doing it. 10 times more than I do. In my super, I know everything, spiritist, yeah, this is how we pray. We don't need that. We have this attitude, don't we? Yeah, there's a lot of spiritists that have this, I know it all kind of thing, right? Be careful with that, right? That's also part of the way that the spirituality will catch us, right? But you can literally pray whatever way you feel like. Makes no difference. Because all of us, no matter what beliefs and patterns or ways of doing it, we all are achieving the same objective, right? We're just to project that thought into the universe. Now, does that mean that I actually pray without actually saying anything or doing anything? 100%. Yeah, I can do that, right? Do I need an aid to do it? Some people do it. That's perfectly fine, right? So the how really, everyone will have its own way of achieving it. Some people will have to meditate, or like I do all the time. I literally just lock in for 5 seconds. Say, I thanks for this or help me that. I just project that thought for 5 seconds, right? And this is also a prayer. I'm asking, right? And we will receive something back. But we're going to get to that in a minute. Yeah. Now, there is a question though that I really like to. Every time I talk about prayer, I read this question, which is 660 on the Spirit's book, and Kardec's going to ask this, like, does prayer make people better? That's a great question, isn't it? Does it make people better, right? And the Spirit's going to say, yes, because those who pray fervently and confidently strengthens themselves against a lot of things like temptations, evil, right? So God sends them good spirits to assist them, right? Such help is never refused when sincerely asked for, right? In other words, actually, the act of praying connects us to God. Well, that makes sense, isn't it? We're actually projecting a thought, right? And obviously, it's going to reach, the higher spirits, and it's going to reach God, and we're going to strengthen our connection to it. So, but that's a little catch there, right? Because the little catch is that such help is never refused when sincerely asked for. That makes a little difference, right? Because there are many moments where we're projecting these thoughts were actually not very good thoughts, right? Maybe not us, because we're all super evolved, right? But how about those people out there who sometimes ask for things that are actually not good at all? Like, think about maybe in politics. I don't know. I thought, no, don't think about politics. That's going to totally create some bad vibes in our spiritual environment here. But let's say in another universe that's not ours, right? There's this opposing ideas in politics that are really clashing each other, right? Not this does not happen in our planet, okay? And how often you see one side of that story praying, actually using God to attack the other side. Well, that doesn't happen. Okay, let's not talk about politics. Let's talk about soccer. How many times we catch people, and again, this doesn't happen on this planet, but how many times we catch people praying or asking God to do something against another person? Maybe not physical, but in a way that they will be less advantageous than us. Instead of, does that happen? I do that. Like, maybe this is my moment, right? It's like, hello everyone, good morning. I have something to say now. But this is something we do, right? We try to think we don't, but actually we do, right? And that's kind of what I said in the beginning when I saw the kid driving the car, right? Because we're like, yeah, it's like, yes, we are those babies, right? That's who we are, right? We do things and we think we don't do, and then we forget what we do. And then when we really do it, we kind of put it under the rug and make it disappear, right? And then we'll deal with it when we discarnate, right? Because the rug goes out and we look back and like, oh my God, this is me. It's like, yes, that stuff there is all you, buddy, take it, So this is who we are, right? So the idea is that good spirits will come to assist, right? No matter what, if the prayer or the ask is sincerely asked for, and it's obviously we deserve it, and obviously if it's a really, really good ask, right? It has to be something positive, right? You can't ask for something negative. That can't happen. Right? So obviously the spirits are going to talk to the same kind of follow-up question about the idea of formulas for praying, and we address that. Obviously there's nothing, there's no formula that's more effective or less effective than any other formula, right? And we already addressed that, okay? Now, Kardec also mentioned something in the Gospel according to Spiritism, the same chapter we're talking about, right? The idea that, as we mentioned before, Leon Denis writes it the same way, the idea that faith is this concept that it follows a path of truth, right? And follows a path that you're going to reach the end of that road of moral evolution, establish that almost sync perfect connection with God, right? And that will create a scenario where you have no fear, right? There's no question, right? You can see the truth in any side through the fog, as Leon Denis puts to us, right? And it doesn't matter the how. What matters is the purpose, the intent, right? And your faith, right? So, James, the Gospel, James chapter 2, I think, we're going to have a passage that's, again, it's very, very interesting too, and I like to read that passage. I'm reading exact straight from the Gospel here, just to illustrate that. What good is it? Because now one thing about faith, we talked about how to do it and all of that, and we talked about asking, but we also have to think about the receiving part of it, right? So James is going to say, Jesus is going to say, what good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds, right? Can such faith save them? Suppose brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, go in peace, keep warm and well fed. Oh, we don't do this. Sorry. Oh, we do this. Right? Do we do this? We see someone in need, it's like, oh yeah, that's right. Go in faith, God will help you. Right? But we don't. And we don't help. Right? Which is interesting. But there's nothing about their physical needs. In other words, you see someone in need and you do nothing about it. And it doesn't be physical need as clothes. It could be emotional, support, talk, listen, right? Being nice. Being nice is a type of good action that we forget all the time, right? And then it continues, in the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. Ha. So faith, remember that relationship with God, right? If you have a lot of faith, but it's empty, in other words, you don't actually follow what you believe, or you don't do what you say you believe, or you have faith on, what is that? That's what it says. But someone will say, he'll continue, you have faith, I have deeds. Show me your faith without deeds, and I'll show you my faith by my deeds. Ah. So this is now a totally different concept, right? Between the concept of idea of faith and ask and we shall receive, right? The idea is that true faith is not the one we talk about, right? True faith is the one we show by action, right? So show you my faith by my deeds, right? That makes a complete different concept of faith, right? Because we still struggle with that nowadays, right? How many thousands and thousands of people, unfortunately, use faith or a mask of faith to hide those really, really dark things that they want to hide from people. In other words, they put this beautiful face in front of, like, oh, I go to Spiritist Center, church, temple, whatever. I go to all those places every week, and I pray, and I donate my pennies to someone, right? But the reality is, deep inside, I do nothing, right? My faith is actually dead. That's not real faith, right? Because whenever I'm called into action, I don't do it. And I probably gave this example here like a million times, but you guys, if you heard this before from me, please just forgive me, okay? But I think it's a good example because I tend to repeat things sometimes. But this is a great example, and it happened to me actually several times. But this one happened specifically when I was busing to Hamilton every day. I would use bus 16, the go bus all the way to Hampton back. I was living there and working here. So we got into the bus, and the bus was pretty full. There was basically a few seats left, and this gentleman comes in, and obviously he's in a condition of living in the streets at the time. You can see, right? So he was carrying his stuff in little plastic bags. You kind of picture the image, right? So he walks into the bus and he's trying to find a seat, right? And he was probably a little bit intoxicated by something that I don't know, it doesn't make a difference. But he would come in, and everybody was like kind of blocking the seats, right, with stuff, right, to prevent him from having a seat, right? I had a seat beside me, and I have that moment. I said, what am I gonna do, right? We all have those moments. right? If I'm coming here and tell you that, oh, for sure, I stood up and I grabbed his, oh, I mentioned part of the thing. So I grabbed his hand. I was like, please sit here, my kind brother. No, I'm not there yet. I'm not. If you're not ready to accept that, oh boy, it's a long road. Because at least I'm at the moment that I know how bad things can get, So this is me. But I had that 2-second decision guided by my mentor that was there at the time too. He's like, yeah, watch out. We're watching it. Right? I was like, oh, okay, that makes a difference, right? So it's like, and I basically didn't block my seat, but I can see my mentor guiding him towards my seat, right? I can see that happen. It's like, oh, I know exactly what you're planning. And that happened. He sat beside me, and at that moment, which is kind of interesting, he started talking like a fraternal meeting, right, in the bus. So we started talking about his life and things and you know what? I said, this is my mission right now. I accept it. I did. I don't do this all the time, though, by the way. I still mess up like 98% of the time. But that time was the 1% of the time that I said, I think I'm going to do the right thing, right? So I did. I started talking to this gentleman, and we, everybody was upset at us, right? Because we're chatting about a lot of things, and everybody around was like, why are you talking to this guy, right? And I'm like, I don't know, like he's normal, it's a person, right? We should talk to, right? Doesn't matter. So I felt the vibes of the entire bus. How crazy that is, right? So here I am doing this and being mentally attacked by the group, right? Peer pressure. And I'm talking, and then halfway through the conversation, he starts saying, I'm going back home. And I'm like, oh, that's so cool. Like, where is home? It's like, oh, and then he couldn't answer. Like, he was saying, I'm going home. I want to go home, and I'm going home today, right? And I'm like, okay, so where's home? Is it Hamilton? Like, we're going to Hamilton. No. Home means, and then he eventually said, home means meeting my family that died. In other words, he was trying to kill himself, right? That day. That was his plan, right? And on realizing that, then I got the whole picture, right? So the spirituality found someone that was 0.1% capable of accepting that person, that's me, right? And said, you know what, let's work this out. So guided him into the bus, sat him beside me, and that was my decision whether to talk or not. How many times we say no? Every day. How many? I did. 99% of the time. That time I said yes. And he walked out of the bus, not thinking about dying again. 45 minutes of intervention, like those they wanted to call on TV, Do I feel great? Yeah, I feel good doing that. I feel horrible that I missed the other 100 times that I had a chance to do it, right? So this is the real struggle, right? We ask for things, we want things, right? When our faith is called into action, we like, right? No, we don't, right? So the idea of that, showing your deeds to show your faith, that what guarantees you that result we ask so much, right? We ask, oh, we want this, we want that, But why? If you're not actually showing, what all the things that you can, right? All the help you can. So that day was interesting because obviously when they left the bus, we all left the bus, and I could even I felt even the change in the mindset of the people around me, right? During the so it's so crazy that my conversation with that gentleman changed actually a bunch of people in that bus, right? Think about it. A bunch of people that did not want to sit beside him, so blocked the seats, right? So he could not sit. I could feel their mindset because I was feeling being attacked mentally, right? Like the little spiritual darts, right? So I could see them disappearing as we talked. They started to kind of well, disappeared, right? And by the end of it, I did not feel any darts anymore, right? And I felt a really, really good vibe, right? Even from that gentleman. And I don't know what happened to him, but I'm sure at least I tried, right, to do something, right? And that's really the concept that James writes to us, and Jesus is telling him, like, show me those deeds, show your faith by your deeds, right? And I just felt bad because I realized at that moment how many times my inoperative faith took over. In other words, my faith without any action, right? And from that time on, interesting that it happened. It happens every week, I would say. There's something that happens that I'm going to be called into action, right? And all I have to do is actually pay attention to things. And this may happen in your work and you don't realize, right? So my office door is now open because every week someone's going to come into my office randomly, crying or telling me a story about their kids or like saying something completely like nothing that I planned or had a meeting to discuss, right? And now I mentally say, okay, I got it. This is my work, right? On my work, and it happens. So there's this, for example, this lady that she works as I think she's not there anymore, but she used to work as an assistant to pathologists at one of the big hospitals in Toronto, and she had this desk tucked in the corner of the room, right? And I can see like a gazillion people coming by her, and they never actually spoke to her, right? She was just kind of physically there, right? But everybody's like walking in front of the desk back and forth. And I was a student at that time, and I got the little hint. I said, maybe I should talk to this person, right? Why not? Right? I was called. That day I answered two. I don't know, that counts as two. I'm doing not too bad. So 2 out of 1,000,000. So I walked by her desk and I turned to her. I said, good morning. Like, how are you doing? She almost fell off her chair, right? Like, oh, good morning. It's like, oh, good morning. How are you doing? It's like, oh, I'm doing fine. And then we had this 5-second conversation. And then she started talking. It's like, oh, and then we realized that we both like to run and walk or whatever, right? So she's just completed the Bruce Trail, which is like a 900-kilometer trail, which is impressive. Okay? And then we had a great time. And then I walked. Then several weeks later, we had a departmental meeting, and she was there. She comes by me and said, that day, you changed my whole month. Like you changed my life. Not my life in a way that she was doing something, but you changed the entire environment, right? I needed it. I needed to talk. And I just wanted to tell you that's what happened that day, right? Look at the power of it, right? What did I do? I said good morning in a nice way, and I projected a good vibe, right? Because some people say good morning, it's like good morning, get out of here, right? It's a good morning here and a get out of here there, right? It's like a double hit, right? We do that too. It's like a thank you, right? Thank you, like a thank you and a punch at the same time, right? The punch from the thoughts, right? And the good and the thank you from the mouth, right? So I said good morning, and I said like a good hug mentally, right? And we can make a difference, right? So just to think about the idea of operative faith, inoperative faith, right? But even like if you think about Matthew writes about this when he was talking about. So it's interesting. And Matthew writes about the idea of Jesus. Why I cannot expel these demons from these people, right? He asked Jesus, right? Same idea, right? He's like, here we are. We are the select one. We're like doing all these miracle things, and this guy, the spirits take over, and I can't. It seems like I don't have the power to do it, right? So Jesus says, right? If your faith was the size of a mustard seed, that's a very famous passage, right? You can move that mountain from there. You can expel this. You can do whatever you want, right? But he's talking about the faith with deeds, right? Not about the faith we like to talk about all the time, right? So nothing will be impossible to you. So think about whatever you can ask with that faith, you shall receive it. Right? The topic of the passage today. So the ask and receive is ingrained in the entire structure of faith, right? But then it gets layers and layers of getting more complicated because what is your faith? Like, is this the true faith, the unshakable one, the one you show with deeds? Is it inoperative? Is it the one you like to talk about but didn't do anything with it, right? And then, considering that, like, what are you asking and what you expect to receive back, right? Because I deal with health and disease all the time, right? I'm an ophthalmologist, so I actually diagnose diseases. That's my job, right? To understand what someone else has. So I can see the challenges of every diagnosis in every person, right? When I'm doing it. And I can tell you that, from a spiritual perspective, the disease is the mechanism of cure of your physical body, right? So it's the true cure, the one that comes from your perispirit through your body and eventually will be disappearing from you as a person, right? But at the moment of the disease, what we're seeing is the struggle, right? The pain and the suffering, right? That process is causing us, right? So we tend to ask to get rid of it. Like we ask to someone that annoys us to disappear. We should actually pray for every person that annoys you every day, because they're the ones that are actually teaching you. Imagine a world that everyone was super nice to you. How are you going to learn to tolerance, respect, dealing with different ideas? How are you going to learn that? Impossible. You know what? A nice movie about this. Like, sorry, I'm going to be talking for another hour. No, I'm almost done. But so I like to bring these examples because I watch movies with my kids, and it's funny. They're looking at I'm looking at all this entire, potential examples of things, right? So one movie, the Lego movie. Have you ever watched the Lego movie? No. Okay. So if you have a chance, it's obviously a kids movie, but if you have a chance to watch a little part of the Lego movie, the beginning of the movie, they sing this song like, that everything's perfect, basically, right? Everything's perfect. Everything's like, and but everyone is trained and taught from the same manual that they have to do the same thing all the time, and everyone replies and answers the same thing, that everything is awesome. It's wonderful because you can see them moving along. It's like everything is awesome, right? Everything is good. Everything's perfect. They all say hi and good and eat, and drink the coffee the same way. They say good morning the same way. There's no challenge. Zero. Like everyone is uniformly, perfectly following an order, right? Without thinking. When the first person thinks, the whole universe of Legos collapse, right? It becomes a problem. Because one starts to question, like, why am I doing this, right? Think about this. That's your free will, right? It's like, wait, I'm free to think, and I have the free will to decide, right? Then they realize, obviously, there's a lot of other things that happen in the movie, but the idea is that, yeah, there are things that will throw those wrenches into that concept of everybody being perfect, right? And they actually learn with that struggle. That's where they learn, right? Because if you're just following a manual, actually you're not learning anything. You're just doing whatever the manual is telling you to do, right? And that's why when we ask and pray, right? When we ask, we just ask for things to be perfect, right? We learn nothing from it because we're not perfect. The laws are not inside of us. So I cannot learn from an environment that things are all perfect, right? So in that environment, I'm the wrench. So that's what God does. God's so perfect, right? He'll take a planet who's struggling, right? He'll send some of those struggling spirits to another planet, right? So they can be the little wrench, like in another planet, and then create that, learning environment, right? Where people have to learn with differences and struggles, right? So there's always learning. They also get spirits that are really more evolved and bring back to some of those planets, like happened to us, right? It's like, okay, let's just help these guys just a little bit, right? Pull them out of this struggle, trials, expiations, right? That's why we're going through this amazing thing called planetary transition, which is another thing, not the topic of today. But anyways, so that's what I had to talk about, the idea of asking we shall receive, and the idea of faith. And if you guys have any questions on the internet, maybe, I'm happy to address. Thank you. Anything there? No? Comments? No? All good, Teresa?
Yeah.
Okay. Everybody's awake? Yeah, just
Everybody's awake. I think that's the hardest part, is the faith through action.
Yeah.
We are, like you said, pointed out really clear. It's very easy to see faith in terms of, oh, I believe in God,
Yeah.
or I believe in Jesus, or I have this or that religion, or I'm a spiritist, or I believe in the spiritual plan.
Yeah.
But the action part, because that's the true prayer, right?
Yeah.
Because usually someone who acts is more likely to the moment they're praying,
Yeah.
to do that with the true.
Exactly. Yeah. So that is completely
Exactly.
connected.
Yeah.
Right. You can't separate, right, the moment of asking, the moment of prayer, to what you're bringing in, like your baggage, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Just like Jesus saying, like, what you're carrying, your load is light, right? So that kind of what you bring in, right, is what makes that connection more intense and powerful.
Yeah, so I think that's what I think when your brother, actually, that's what I'm thinking about exactly that. That's the action.
Yeah.
Is the most important thing. And if I learn the action, then when I'm praying with faith, if I just keep the strength, then we tend to ask for the right things.
Yes.
And I know that it's not just like, oh, God, solve my problem, I need to sit here and do that. No, I'm gonna do my part, but like, give me strength for me to go through this and I can get there, right?
Yeah.
So to me, the action is the main thing.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of Mother Teresa. That was one time asking her, right, what do you say to God when you pray to him? And she said, I don't say anything, I just listen.
Yeah.
And they say, okay, and what God tells you? And she goes, nothing, he just listens.
Yeah.
So just by the way she lived her life, that's a prayer right there, right? She devoted her action to, because she truly believed the faith that she has is so real, that she knew that was the right path. No matter what hardship came through, that is the right path, and I'm going to keep going, right?
Yeah.
So I don't need to have any elaborated prayer here with God and this, and he knows. He knows what I need. So I don't need to ask. Like, of course, it's not a level that.
Yes, she's in that level as a spirit, right?
She's really a spirit on a mission, but someone who didn't ask. That's what I didn't ask anything. I don't know. I don't need. I know it's gonna give me what I need. That's faith.
Yeah.
I just need the path of goodness. What I know is the right thing to do. It's gonna give me what I need.
It's just gonna happen, right? It's like a natural process. Well, so I think that ends our part of this day. So we're going to have the agenda. Perfect. Thank you.
All right. So thank you everyone that was with us over the internet. Hoping to see you here next week again.